Crisis podcast will touch on sensitive topics regarding the human body, sexuality, pregnancy, and all aspects of women's and people with uteruses healthcare. It may not be suitable for all listeners. I'm Kate.
Hola, I'm Piyar.
And this is the Midwife Crisis podcast, Microsode.
The podcast where you learn it's not just you. This is where we answer listener emails, readdress previous episodes, and importantly, share our self-care.
Today, we wanted to talk about a very difficult article that some of you may have seen that was published on NBC News by Brandy Zadrozny on February 21st, 2020. Trigger warning for everyone out there, it does involve a fetal demise. The article is titled, I Brainwashed Myself with the Internet. Nearly 45 weeks pregnant, she wanted a free birth with no doctors. Online groups convinced her it would be okay.
So if you're listening to this episode and you are not driving, go ahead and click on the episode info where we have provided a link to the article. Again, this is a very sensitive and sad subject, so be warned. Do you want to announce the link right now, or you just want to have folks look it up?
Sure. So again, I think if you go on the NBC News website, so www.nbcnews.com, you could type it in the search bar, she wanted free birth, no doctors, and that will come up.
Yeah, it should pop up.
Yeah. So if you are listening at this point, you've either read the article, and if you have not, we're just going to give you a really sort of brief summary. So basically, the article is about a pregnant woman who, during her pregnancy, had a long commute to work. And on her commute, like many of us, she listened to a lot of podcasts. And so she talks about some of these podcasts that she listened to, and she talks about one that really really got her. She was totally enamored with it, and it is a podcast called the Freebirth Podcast.
For those of you who are unfamiliar, free birth, also often called unassisted childbirth, is the process of giving birth to a baby away from the hospital, usually at home, and without the presence of any medical staff or professional birth attendants. This contrasts with home birth, which is a birth at home, but a midwife is in attendance. And so you have someone who has medical training to take care of you there. So this is without any medical professionals.
Yeah. And I think when we think traditionally, a lot of people will say things like, oh, well, no one ever used to use a birth attendant, but you sort of did, because it would be your mother, or your mother's mother, or your neighbor, someone who was still sort of there for you and would be catching the baby and, working with you and getting you through it. So although, as we know, birth is a process and it's something that women and people with uteruses do. We don't do it for you. We're just there. This is sort of different from that.
And back then, those people also, many of them had apprenticed with other people in the community.
True.
And so you sort of learned on the job. You apprenticed in the same way that people in trades apprentice.
Right.
And you go and you do a number of births and you watch and you learn.
Yeah. So this woman was feeling very empowered by the stories told on this podcast. She mentions in the article how she'd listened to something like 70 episodes, each one with these powerful women who she saw reflected herself. She saw these powerful, educated women who were taking charge of their birth. And she was also feeling scared and unheard from her previous experiences in healthcare. She mentions a couple times where she had been to the gynecologist or been to different, physicians and different providers and felt like no one was listening to her. And because of this, she planned her own free birth at home. And she says she didn't tell a lot of people because she wanted to feel supported and she didn't want any of that negativity. And as she went well past her due date to 43 weeks, whereas typically around 42 weeks we would recommend induction, at 43 weeks she began getting worried, and she was seen at the hospital where they strongly recommended she got induced, and she'd actually signed up for it, but she chose not to. She ended up just seeking support in her online groups.
For those of you who aren't aware, a normal pregnancy is on average 40 weeks. And at 41, everyone gets a little antsy because your placenta sort of has a shelf life and it doesn't nourish the baby and kind of take care of the situation in the way that it had been as it ages. And so that just at 43, that's a pretty extensive amount of time to be pregnant. So during this time, she had some of the warning signs that we see in women who remain pregnant beyond 41 weeks. And that included less movement. When she went into labor, things became intense and she had trouble listening to the baby's heartbeat. She broke her water and she had thick meconium, which is when the babies have a bowel movement in the womb, in the uterus. And she knew this could be dangerous and went to the hospital where, sadly, there was no heartbeat.
Yeah.
No fetal heart. The baby didn't have a heartbeat,
Yeah.
which means that it was no longer living.
Yeah. So that sort of, in general, is what the article is about. This is really heavy. And first, I just want to take a moment to process this and really provide a safe space for this woman in this sad situation. Of course, there is no way for us to know for sure if this would have been a different outcome if she had been in induction or had steady obstetrical care. I mean, what I feel that I do know is that this is awful, and we definitely want to send her lots of love because I'm sure that she has to deal every day with this tragedy.
When people choose, when they make decisions to birth in whatever manner that they choose to birth in, and even choose their birth attendants, there are some folks who won't see midwives despite our training,
Right.
or who only want to see physicians, and some who don't want to see physicians. They only want to see midwives. And basically everyone, or who want to have home births, everyone makes choices about the kind of care that they are going to receive or solicit. And most often we also take responsibility for those kinds of, for the outcomes, and we're anticipating that they're going to be good. They're going to be positive. They're going to end in happiness. And we do send our condolences out to this person, because that we have had that experience. We have been with patients who have lost their babies because they, for different and various and sundry reasons, did not survive the process. And it's heartbreaking, not just for the patient, most certainly, but also for anyone who's in attendance. And so it's not something you just have a heartless attitude about and think that it's just awful. We bring it up because we feel like this is part of our goal, our mission here is to also provide education. We're humorous and we want everyone to kind of like the things that we do and say, but we also feel like our job is to educate. We have the credentials to do that, and that's why we use them.
Right.
This isn't, sure, it's entertainment, but we try to be honest about our facts and the science behind what we do.
Yeah.
And so this, is not, this is not a typical situation, and it's unfortunately, despite what many may think, it's not a good situation. It's not something that we would ever recommend for anyone because of the high potential for a bad outcome.
Yeah. Yeah. So when I read this article, I just felt that it's a really great example of how our current healthcare system in this country has many faults. So first of all, just access to safe care. And safe care doesn't necessarily mean in a hospital. So safe care is going to look different depending on who you are, which means that every person deserves access to providers who include these patients in their care, who include the families, who provide reassurance to women and people and their partners. Most importantly is that people deserve to be part of their care, to be included in their care. And I think it's important to be open to trying to make decisions together with your patient. Now, again, we talk about this a lot, sort of like educating patients and informed consent, which means anything that you want to do, including maybe, let's say the patient really wants to go past their due date. So again, giving this patient the risks, the benefits, the alternative choices they have, maybe finding out what is the core of not wanting to be induced. Maybe they're scared of the medication. I've heard people say Pitocin causes autism. So, there's an opportunity for education and for, providing this person with some scientific background and or some alternatives. Hey, let's try this, let's try that to get you into labor if you don't want that, So I think first of all, there is something kind of going on with our healthcare system. Secondly, alternatives for people have. Oh, go ahead.
I think we're trying to work on shared decision making.
Yes.
Just generally speaking, but we have a long way to go.
Yes.
And as a consequence, a lot of people are fearful of the whole healthcare machine, that it just really frightens them. And so they make decisions that sometimes aren't, you wouldn't think would be the best, or become risky in terms of outcome, just because they are so afraid and so anxious.
Well, and history, right, is rich. And our history in this country is rich with leaving vulnerable populations really underserved and sometimes harmed. And I think you've touched on, how that history has affected the Black community. And, certainly when we look at things like the AIDS epidemic with the LGBTQIA population, I mean, these are times when then approaching something even that is quote unquote normal, childbirth, it can be scary for people to have to trust in the healthcare system. And
somehow we have to, we're big on judgment in the healthcare field. And so somehow we need to take judgment out of the equation. And so that's something that, it takes a lot of work, but we just have to chip away at it. I had a patient recently who was over 41 weeks, and she did not want to be induced. And she came in for a routine prenatal visit, and the baby had some decelerations in the heart rate. So that is a sign that something's going on there. So she came into the hospital, and the baby continued to have that happen. And the recommendation from everyone who saw her is that you have to be induced. And she said, well, I don't want to be induced. That's not what I want. And I don't want chemicals, and I don't want this, and I don't want that. Just to make a long story short, it was much more involved than that. And so the more people came in and just told her what was going to happen to her and her body, she dug her heels in, and she said, I'm not doing it. Yeah. And I came to believe that it wasn't so much that she didn't want to, as she did have some fears and some anxieties, and no one was really addressing that. And in the end, it turned out that she felt like no one was listening to her. Right. So she actually asked to go home. And everyone said, it started becoming kind of hall talk. She's crazy. She's just crazy. She doesn't want to go home. She wants to go home, and she needs to be induced, and we need to do this to her and that to her. And she says, not until a certain time, and so on and so forth. And so then everyone got busy, and I went into the room, and I said, I'm here to take care of you, and I'm here to help everyone else who's been taking care of you. And this is what my job is. And so this is what our plan is for you, and to keep your baby safe. Now, tell me what you think and how you feel about this plan. And then she proceeded to say, I don't want it. And I said, tell me why not? Tell me what's wrong with the plan, because there could be something wrong with the plan. So tell me what your thoughts are on it, and let's see if we can have a meeting of the minds. Yeah. In the end, no, she did not go home. And we didn't do all of what the plan was for her, but basically, I bought her some time. Yeah. I said, let's see what happens overnight. We're just going to keep an eye on you and the baby. And then by morning, if things have not changed, do we agree that we're going to proceed? Because it's not going to get better for the baby. It's probably going to get worse. Right. And I said, I need you to get into mother mode. Like, you're this baby's mom already. And so I need you to take over as though this child is in an infant seat next to you. What would you want to do that's best for it? Not as much as what you're thinking you want your personal birth experience to be. I know you want a certain birth experience, but also you want a really healthy child. And so right now we have a good child. How long do we want to risk it? Right. In the end, she said to me, I'm really happy that I met you, and I feel like you honored just me as a person. No, I didn't get to do everything that I wanted. And she said, but I feel like you were a very good sort of intermediary, because you talked to who her provider was, who wasn't there. And she said, and I'm good with this plan, and I think it's going to turn out fine. And I'm really grateful that I met you. So I felt like I did something good, because she felt like no one was listening to her and that she was being judged. And I will add that she was a woman of color, and she felt like that was playing into it.
Yeah.
And she said, they're just thinking she's just crazy and she's not smart. And she said, and I am smart.
Right.
And she was smart. And so, but she said they just have a plan. They want to hurry up and do it. And I don't understand.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, I think healthcare can be a machine, right? And so it works, and we think of it as just this linear way, but sometimes it has to zig and zag, and you got to be creative and meet people where they are. Right.
That's exactly what I did.
Yeah. Yeah. So absolutely, I agree with that. The second point I wanted to make was we maybe need some more alternatives. So in many states in the United States, home birth is banned.
Whoa.
And certain types of trained midwives, like CPMs, are banned. And so for those families in those places, their only choice is pretty much to go to the hospital with maybe not even a midwife, maybe, a physician, or maybe a midwife, it doesn't matter, but either way in a hospital, or be alone, And so for some people, that is a hard choice for them, and they make that choice. And especially if they have, let's say the first delivery was in the hospital and it was traumatic for them.
Trauma is big.
That's a big deal. And so maybe they're so scared to walk back into those, doors, they'd rather risk it at home. And so I think we need to do better. We need to educate everyone, our lawmakers, every state, on a federal level, that midwives are good care and can, really provide equal or sometimes better care than what we can provide in hospitals, even in the home. And that with proper training programs, with, financial support to get people to go to school to become care providers, we can get more access for people and just better care. Because it's not going to be a perfect fit for everyone.
Right.
Yeah. And so my third piece, which I think is what on sort of social media, everyone was really like clinging to, because people can be cruel. And of course, the first thing people would say is, oh my God, how disgusting. How could she do that to her baby? And blah, blah, blah. And no one in their right mind is going to do something if they think it's going to harm their baby.
Not intentionally.
Right. So I think the biggest, piece of that was, to me, health literacy in the face of social media. It is very tricky. We all, at all points in time, have our phones. Our phones are computers, so we have access all the time to all types of information. And so determining whether or not that information is accurate, appropriate, applies to you, if that evidence if it's evidence-based, if it's science-based, that's hard to do. That is an enormous part of what we go to school for.
Right.
And so, I've seen this on like mugs. It'll say, don't confuse your Google result with my medical degree, which is a little snarky, but I also kind of get it, because again, you may be a very intelligent person, but part of our higher education is determining what is good evidence and what is not.
Exactly.
And so anyone can find an article supporting what they want.
Anything.
Like this essential oil cures this disease, and so anyone can find an article, but is it a good article? How many, people were in it? Did they account for other factors? All of those things. So I think that is a really big deal. And so for many people on the internet, and for people, of course, who have had successful births unassisted at home, they're going to be huge proponents of it. And again, they might have different factors. They might have been totally healthy and a normal BMI, and their baby came alone at, spontaneously at 38 weeks, and they were multips, and all these things that make them maybe sort of a better candidate for this unassisted birth. But no one is telling the reader, the consumer of this information, whether or not that applies to them. So I think there is a difference in being successful in something and being an expert in something, and that can sometimes be confused. And there's no sort of governing body for this information, right? It's just out there. So that is really tricky. And honestly, I don't know how to remedy that.
Sometimes success is based on just opportunity and luck and whatever.
It's true.
So it's just really an interesting concept. And sometimes it's hard work, which giving birth is hard work. That's the hard work piece. But the stars line up right. And then sometimes the stars don't line up. And then you're the one that winds up getting the assignment. Someone has to be in the percentage of bad outcomes.
Yeah.
And you try to do what you can to not make yourself be in that group. You don't want to be in that club.
Yeah.
Anyways, we're going to take a quick break now, and we'll be right back discussing this very difficult topic of free birth and fetal demise.
Greetings, and this is Wine Time with Grown Ass Woman, an intergenerational conversation with Ife Michelle. I'm Sexty.
And Sharon Leanne. You make me want to add a name. Make sure you hit us up. We want to hear from you. Again, our email is
gawomenspeak@gmail.com.
Okay. And we are back. You are listening to the Midwife Crisis podcast, Microsode. Before the break, we discussed, and we have been discussing, a very difficult topic involving fetal demise. So this is just, again, a trigger warning. This might be one that you may want to skip or listen to without your little critters in the car and that kind of thing. So after kind of discussing this topic, and again, I recommend everyone sort of read the article. It's well written, really without judgment to this woman, which I think is important. And so my questions for us, PR, are, would you provide care for a person if they disclosed to you that they were planning an unassisted home birth? And should we ban groups like these Facebook free birth groups? Should we, have someone that's out there policing the group that's essential oils for healing cancer, or, all of these sort of alternative things that can sometimes have poor outcomes?
I don't think we have the right to ban anybody. Some things, sure. But to be banning things like free birth groups or from folks saying essential oils can heal cancer. And we know that's fallacy. But part of living here is that we have free will and we get to exercise it. So I'm not sure that, I have to be careful, because there are some things that are just, I don't abide hate. However, for the most part, we have the right to be able to speak on certain things. You just need to have the common sense to walk away from it.
Well, and
if
I think
it's absurd.
Yeah, and I think in some cases, again, a lot of these people are on the defense because they maybe need to be. And so to do something like that, to police these groups, I think would even cause maybe more fuel to the fire, Like, of course they want to take it away because, they don't want you to have this opportunity, or
it's
that
seen
kind of
as
thing.
mind control and conspiracies and things like that.
So I don't think it would help, probably.
No, I don't think that it would help either. And I think that I think everyone does know that we have free will, but I really do believe that you need to be well informed. That's not being well informed, I have to say, because it isn't the science. And if you're not a scientist, then you don't know the science. I just believe in that. This isn't like Abraham Lincoln, where you become a lawyer by reading a lot of books. And so you don't become a scientist by just, lurking the internet or whatever. So that's sort of my personal opinion about that. It may be right, maybe, and may not be. Would I provide care for a person if they disclosed that they were planning an unassisted home birth? I don't, that's a really good question, because my thought is that I would prefer that you at least had good prenatal care prior to giving birth. I can't control how you wind up deciding to give birth. I had a patient once who I did provide I think, decent, very good prenatal care too. And then one morning she called me at home, and I thought that was a curious thing because I never gave her my home number. And I was getting ready for work, and she said, "Can you come to my house?" And I said, "No." And she said, "I had the baby, and
Oh my gosh.
I need some help. So I was wondering if you could come to my house before you go to work." And I said again, "No, I can't do that." And I said, "How did you have the baby at home?" And I said, if you need help, you need to go to the hospital right now. Like, call 911 and go to the hospital. I said, "And who caught your baby?" And she said, "My partner." And I said, "Oh, interesting. And how did you guys know? Like, what did you know what you were doing?" And she said, "Yeah, we read up on it." So we were real quick. She said, "We were planning this all along, but we didn't want to say anything because we knew that you would probably object. But and you were getting paid for the part that you were doing, as though it was about the money. It wasn't about the money for me. But now we're having a little bit of problem. So we were thinking maybe you could come and help us out with that part because we feel like we made a bond with you." And so I said, "I'm flattered that you feel connected. So hear me, our connection, like, hear me out. We are connected. Call 911 and get to the hospital and solve that problem that you're having," which it was a problem. And I said, "And I can't come to your home, and I'm not going to come to your home because you've chosen to do something that then I cannot be responsible for what occurs subsequently." And so she said, "Okay, I understand." And eventually they made their way to the hospital and had their little issue taken care of. But the baby was fine. Yeah, the baby was fine. But I think that that's interesting because they were planning the whole time to have an unassisted birth. And but I'm back to thinking I would prefer that you at least had solid prenatal care. Yeah. And I would constantly probably try to discourage you because of all my fears about obstetric emergencies. But you have free will.
So that was my exact thought as well. I had seen on a lot of different sort of comment sections on this article where people were saying things like, "I would never provide care for that person." And I was like, well, my thought is each and every time you see this person, it is an opportunity to educate, support, reassure. Exactly. You never know what you're going to say or what you're going to show this person in your care that's going to maybe build some trust and make them think differently, Right. And again, this is so separate than home birth because, again, if you're planning a home birth with a certified professional, they are assessing your home. They are making sure you have all the supplies. They are checking on you and baby. I mean, some people sort of associate the two and they are not the same. This is just someone who just decides to have their baby at home. No, there are people who just have their babies at home. One of our good friends, a midwife, accidentally had her baby at home because sometimes babies happen, And, she still called 911 and traveled by ambulance to come in and get assessed and, maybe needed some stitches or, that kind of thing. I was not providing her care, but she did come to the hospital. And it's, it's one of those things where do babies happen unattended? Sure. Are they okay? Lots of times, yeah. Because lots of times if those babies are coming, they're just coming. That being said, it may not be the safest thing for everyone. And that distinction and how to help people maybe understand what makes them either a really great or really poor candidate for that is part of what you would be able to do if you were seeing them for these visits.
Exactly.
So my feeling was absolutely. And people worry about litigation, which is not to bat an eye at. It's a serious thing in our business. But you would also have every opportunity to document, all the teaching and all of the discussion that you have with the patient and what was encouraged and that kind of thing.
What was discouraged.
Yeah.
And I think that you're doing a bigger disservice to shut them down.
Yes.
And to say, "I don't want any parts of you. I don't want any parts of your care." And that's shutting people down. That's not meeting folks where they are. And like you said, you're losing opportunities to convince them and to educate them about a different way that might lead to a better outcome.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's a really interesting, very touching and interesting topic. We have so many in our backpack
Yeah.
of midwifery. It is, but if this has happened to you, you are not alone. You're not the only one. And if your outcome was good, we salute you. And if it was not, we hold you in our thoughts and our emotional care. Speaking of emotional care, I'm switching gears a little bit.
We gotta do it. We gotta do it.
Self-care corner.
Every time we made our voices heard permanently. We were like, we're gonna do self-care corner each time.
And so we're going to talk about how we have loved ourselves in the past few weeks or however long it's been since our last episode. So anyways,
okay.
Tell us, what have you done to take care of yourself?
Yeah. So I think in this, we've talked extensively about sort of the demands and the rigors of this job and what it entails. And a lot of that is time away from your family. And so my self-care has been and is coming up just having some time with my kids. My kids had school break, and actually I sort of determined for their own self-care that they might benefit from a couple days off of school, and took them out, and we went to go see my family and visited my parents. And it was so amazing to just be with my kiddos. You know, my partner wasn't able to come, but it was so amazing to go back to my parents' house where, my dad cooked meals for us and whatever I wanted to eat, and, made the special waffles and all that kind of stuff, each and every day. And, my mom did all my laundry, and she fuzz buzzed the crotch of all my running pants where my thighs rub, like just all the kind of things that like only moms can do. And I got to be with my kids and spend really like quality time with them. And it was just so nice. And I'm going to do so again this weekend. And it is so wonderful. I think for a lot of us that have families, have kids, they're so special. And in the everyday, it's stressful and we're tired and you're trying to like get your shoes on, get in the car,
Yes.
All that kind of stuff. And you're just kind of like, ah. So to be able to have some time where those
It's
everyday
relaxing and having fun, laughing every day.
Exactly. Where those everyday stressors are really lessened is like a blessing and a privilege. And so I'm just so thankful I've gotten to spend some time with them. And I look forward to this weekend too.
Very nice. My self-care is our listeners don't know this, but my kitchen is undergoing renovation, which has taken twice as long as it should have. Sink came and it was broken. Cabinet came and it was broken. That kind of thing, back and forth. Not like HGTV at all, because they don't go over calamities. And so hence my house looks like, if you came inside, you would call the cops. You'd
be like, you've been robbed. And you're like, no.
Ransacked, bamboozled, something went on in here. And with all of that, this past weekend, I packed up my little weekend bag and I took advantage of the invitation of one of my besties to go to Martha's Vineyard, and the four of us drove up to the ferry and hopped on a boat and rode over to the island and spent the weekend, a long weekend, just talking and laughing and eating meals and having wine and snacks. And it was really cold, and that's okay because it was quiet and not busy there. And it was just a sort of decompression time. And I did not worry myself at all about the state of my home. I just enjoyed the moment and the people that I was with. And I'm really grateful to them for giving me that space until we came back and they said, I have to pee really bad. Can I come inside your house? Whoa. I said, well, you have to sign a waiver. But I don't want you to pee in your pants. So, yes, you can come in my house. No, these are really dear friends. So I don't fear being judged by them. And if I am, it's too bad.
That's okay.
Yes, that is okay.
Oh, man.
Anyways.
Yeah.
Good
Well,
times.
that's awesome. I'm so glad that you got to do that.
Yeah, me too. And I desperately needed it coming off the flu and just going right back to work and pounding it out. Anyhow. I think that concludes our show for today.
Definitely.
We had a good time. We'd like to thank Baobab Tree Studios, our friends, family, and all of you who make this podcast possible.
That's right. And if you have something to add, something to share, if you read this article, you want to give your 2 cents, if you want to tell us what your self-care is, anything like that, please, please, please reach out to us. We absolutely love it. Be sure to subscribe on Spotify, iTunes, Android, and now iHeartRadio.
Yay!
Or wherever you listen. Make sure you like us and follow us on Facebook and Instagram at the Midwife Crisis Podcast. You can also send us messages there or direct messages, or you can email us at midwifecrisispodcast@gmail.com. I have gotten actually a few emails, or we have gotten some emails recently that felt a little bit more personal. So please also include, if you reach out to us, whether or not it's okay for us to share, or if you want us to take your name out or anything like that, because we do love to share those things with you guys. But I have taken pause because I thought, ooh, I wonder if this person actually wants me to share this. So,
Right.
so
And remember,
definitely.
Go ahead.
No, well, so I was going to say, so definitely let us know that. But please also, if you're listening out there, even just to say hi, give us a little hello, because we like to know that you're out there.
Definitely we do. And we want you to remember that it's until the next time. And always that it's never just you. So even though those folks who want to keep it personal, keep it confidential, it's not just you.
That's right. And also, trust your gut and leave a little bit of room for science.
Adios.
Bye.